The wind swept across the desert floor, carrying the scent of dust and dying things. A lone figure stood silhouetted against the sunset, a man whose shoulders bent under invisible weight. Dr. Elias Thorne raised his hand to shield his eyes from the dying light, his palm facing outward. There, etched into the weathered skin, was a mark, intricate and thorny, like a desert plant that had taken root beneath his flesh. He turned his hand slowly, studying the mark as he had done countless times before. The same mark that now adorned the palms of 47 people in Meridian. 47 souls who had trusted him. 47 people who had sought healing and received something else entirely. The thorns around him rustled in the evening breeze, their spines catching the last golden rays of sunlight. Beautiful and dangerous, just like the cure he had created from them. We think we understand the nature of healing, he whispered to the empty desert. But sometimes the medicine leaves deeper wounds than the disease. Meridian had once been a place of promise. Now it was just another dying town on the edge of the desert, buildings bleached by sun and hope dried up like the creek beds. The drought had lasted 7 years, turning farmland to dust and futures to desperation. What remained was a collection of faded storefronts, a diner that served more coffee than food, and people too stubborn or too poor to leave. Dr. Thorne's clinic occupied what had once been a general store. The shelves that had held canned goods and tools now displayed jars of herbs and tinctures. The wooden floor creaked beneath his feet as he moved between patients, the sound as familiar to him as his own heartbeat. At 63, Elias Thorne carried the map of his life on his face, deep lines around his eyes from squinting into microscopes and at patients' wounds, a permanent furrow between his brows from concentration, and smile lines that had begun to fade with the years. His hair had gone from pepper to salt, and his hands, once steady as stone, now occasionally betrayed a slight tremor. "The pain is worse at night, Doc," said Martha Reeves, her arthritic hands curled like claws in her lap. She was his first patient of the day, arriving before the heat made movement unbearable. "Can you give me something stronger?" Dr. Thorne measured out a tincture of willow bark and valerian root. "This will help with the pain, but it won't cure what ails you, Martha." "Nothing will cure old age," she said with a dry laugh. He smiled, but the expression didn't reach his eyes. 7 years of drought had brought more than failed crops. It had brought a wave of ailments that seemed to defy conventional medicine, joint pain that worsened with the dropping water table, respiratory problems that coincided with dust storms, a bone-deep weariness that no amount of rest could cure. As Martha left, Sheriff Davis arrived, removing his hat as he stepped into the relative cool of the clinic. "Morning. Document got any more of that salve?" "Deputy's rash is back. 3rd time this month," Dr. Thorne noted, reaching for a small tin on a high shelf. "Has he been out by the Eastern Ridge again?" The sheriff nodded. "Someone reported seeing lights out there. Probably just kids, but we had to check." Dr. Thorne handed over the tin, his mind elsewhere. The Eastern Ridge, where the thorns grew thickest. Where the soil was stained a rusty red that locals claimed came from old blood spilled in forgotten battles. As the day wore on, more patients came and went. A child with a fever. A miner with a persistent cough. A young woman whose fatigue seemed to have no physical cause. Dr. Thorne treated them all with the tools at his disposal, herbs, tinctures, stitches, and splints, but increasingly, he felt the inadequacy of his remedies. The sun had set by the time his last scheduled patient left. Dr. Thorne was cleaning his instruments when the door creaked open, bringing with it a gust of night air and the silhouette of a stranger. "We're closed," Dr. Thorne said without looking up. "I'm not here for treatment," came the reply, a voice like gravel being crushed underfoot. "I'm here to offer something." Dr. Thorne raised his head. The stranger was tall and thin, wrapped in a dusty coat despite the lingering heat. His face was shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat, but his hands were visible, scarred and weathered, clutching a bundle of thorny plants. "What's that you've got there?" Dr. Thorne asked, unable to mask his curiosity. The stranger placed the bundle on the examination table. "Desert thorns. Not the common kind. These grow only in certain places, where the earth remembers." "Remembers what?" "Pain." The stranger pushed back his hat, revealing a face as lined as the cracked earth outside. "These thorns drink it up, store it. And in the right hands, they can give back something else." Dr. Thorne approached cautiously, examining the plants. They were unlike any desert flora he had cataloged, the thorns longer, curved like talons, with a faint reddish tinge at their tips. "You're saying these have medicinal properties?" The stranger's smile revealed teeth too white for his weathered face. "More than medicinal. Transformative. The native people used them in ceremonies. Later, the settlers discovered their power by accident. There are stories. I deal in science, not stories, Dr. Thorns said, but he couldn't look away from the plants. Science is just a story we agree to believe, the stranger countered. These thorns can cure what ails your people. The drought sickness, the bone weariness, the despair. Dr. Thorns' hand hovered over the bundle. And what do you want in return? Nothing you'd miss. Just a promise that you'll remember where they came from. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the clinic's windows. The moment stretched between them, taut as a suture thread. I'll need to study them first, Dr. Thorns said finally. Run some tests. The stranger nodded, backing toward the door. Of course, a man of science. But don't wait too long. Your people are suffering now. After the stranger left, Dr. Thorns stood alone with the thorns. He should have been suspicious, should have questioned more. Instead, he felt a pull toward the plants, an almost physical yearning to understand their secrets. That night, he worked until dawn, crushing thorns, extracting oils, distilling essences. By morning, he had created a tincture, dark red and smelling of earth and copper. Martha Reeves was his first test subject, arriving as usual before the heat of the day. I've been working on something new, he told her, holding up a small vial. It might help with the pain more effectively than what I've given you before. Martha eyed the liquid dubiously. What's in it? A native plant. Perfectly safe. The lie came easily, wrapped in the justification of potential relief. She took the vial, swallowing its contents with a grimace. Tastes like dirt and old pennies. Give it time to work, Dr. Thorns said, watching her closely. By mid-afternoon, Martha returned, her eyes wide with wonder. The pain is gone, document. First time in years I can make a fist without wanting to scream. She demonstrated, curling her fingers into a tight ball. It was only as she was leaving that Dr. Thorns noticed it, a small mark on her palm, like a thorn had been pressed into the skin and left its outline. How long have you had that mark, Martha? She glanced at her palm, surprised. Never seen it before. Must have scratched myself on something. Over the next week, Dr. Thorns administered the tincture to a dozen patients, each suffering from the various ailments that had plagued Meridian since the drought began. Each reported remarkable improvement. And each, he noted with growing unease, developed the same mark on their palm, a thorn-shaped scar that seemed to emerge from beneath the skin rather than being etched upon it. Word spread quickly in a town as small as Meridian. Soon, people were lining up outside his clinic, seeking the miracle cure. Dr. Thorns tried to be selective, to monitor each patient carefully, but the demand overwhelmed his caution. Sheriff Davis was among those who received the treatment, his deputy's persistent rash vanishing within days. Whatever you're doing, Doc, keep it up, he said, clapping Dr. Thorns on the shoulder. Town hasn't felt this alive in years. But as the number of marked palms grew, so did Dr. Thorns' disquiet. He began to notice subtle changes in his patients beyond their physical improvement. Martha Reeves, once gentle and soft-spoken, snapped at a child who bumped into her outside the post office. The deputy, whose rash had cleared, picked a fight at the diner over a minor slight. There was an edge to the town now, a tension that hummed beneath the surface of everyday interactions. One evening, as Dr. Thorns was closing up, he found Martha waiting for him in the shadows beside his clinic. Something's wrong with me, Doc, she said, her voice tight. The pain's gone, but there's something else now. Something inside me that wasn't there before. What do you mean? She held out her palm, where the thorn marks seemed to have deepened, the lines more pronounced. I feel angry all the time. And I remember things, bad things that happened years ago, like they were yesterday. It's like all the hurt I ever felt is right there under my skin, trying to get out. Dr. Thorns took her hand, examining the mark. When did this start? After your medicine. At first, I was just glad the pain was gone. But now... She pulled her hand away. What did you give us, Doc? He had no answer for her. That night, he returned to the thorns, studying them with renewed intensity. Under his microscope, he saw structures unlike any plant he'd encountered, cellular patterns that seemed almost animal in nature, with filaments that resembled nerve endings. As he worked, a memory surfaced, something the stranger had said about the thorns growing where the earth remembers. On impulse, Dr. Thorns pulled out an old geological survey map of the region. The eastern ridge, where the thorns grew thickest, overlapped with a site marked as a historical burial ground. The next morning, instead of opening his clinic, Dr. Thorns drove to the county records office in the next town over. There, in a dusty basement room, he requested the oldest available documents related to Meridian's founding. Hours later, surrounded by yellowed papers and faded photographs, he found it, a journal belonging to Dr. Ambrose Wells, Meridian's first physician, dated 1879. The entries began mundanely enough, detailing common ailments and treatments of the time. But as Dr. Thorn turned the brittle pages, the tone shifted. April 17, 1879, discovered unusual thorny plants growing at the site of last year's conflict with the native tribe. The plants seemed to have sprouted from blood-soaked ground. Collected specimens for study. May 3, 1879, prepared tincture from the thorns. Administered to Mrs. Holloway for her consumption. Results promising. Her breathing has improved dramatically. Curious side effect noted. A mark resembling the thorn has appeared on her palm. May 20, 1879, more patients treated with the thorn tincture. All show improvement in their physical ailments. All bear the mark. But there are concerning developments. Mrs. Holloway struck her child in anger yesterday, behavior wholly out of character. Others report disturbing dreams, sudden memories of past traumas. Dr. Thorne's hands trembled as he continued reading. The journal detailed Dr. Wells' growing understanding of the thorn's true nature, how they absorbed the suffering of those who died in pain, how the tincture transferred that suffering to those who consumed it. The physical ailments were cured, but at the cost of absorbing emotional and psychological trauma stored in the plants. June 12, 1879. God help me, what have I done? The marked ones have turned on each other. Petty disagreements escalate to violence. It is as if all the rage and pain of those who died on that ground now lives in them. I must find a way to reverse this before it's too late. The final entry was dated June 15, 1879. There is no cure. The marks fade only with time, but the damage remains. I have decided to burn my remaining tincture and bury this journal with the thorns, in hopes that no one will repeat my mistake. May God forgive me. Dr. Thorn closed the journal, his mind racing. The stranger who had brought him the thorns, had he known? Was this some kind of revenge, a way to make the town pay for forgotten crimes? He drove back to Meridian as the sun was setting, the horizon bleeding red into the darkening sky. As he approached the town, he saw flashing lights, sheriff's vehicles parked outside the diner. A crowd had gathered, voices raised in anger. Dr. Thorn parked and pushed his way through the onlookers. Inside, tables were overturned, glass shattered across the floor. Sheriff Davis was restraining the deputy, whose face was contorted with rage. Across from them, the diner's cook clutched a bloody towel to his head. What happened? Dr. Thorn asked, though he already knew the answer. Deputy lost his mind, someone muttered. Started screaming about how the cook had poisoned him. Went at him with a broken bottle. Sheriff Davis looked up, his eyes meeting Dr. Thorn's. Doc, something's wrong with him. With a lot of people. Martha Reeves locked herself in her house with a shotgun, threatening anyone who comes near. The Henderson boy tried to set fire to the school. Dr. Thorn saw the mark on the sheriff's palm, darker now, almost pulsing. I need to talk to you. Privately. In the relative quiet of the sheriff's office, Dr. Thorn laid out what he had discovered, the history of the thorns, Dr. Wells' journal, the true nature of the cure he had administered. You're saying this mark is making people violent? Sheriff Davis asked, examining his own palm. Not exactly. The thorns store pain, emotional, psychological pain. When I made the tincture, I transferred that stored suffering to everyone who took it. The mark is just a physical manifestation. So we're what, possessed by the pain of dead people? Dr. Thorn shook his head. It's more like, the thorns broke down a wall inside you. All the hurt you've ever experienced, all the rage you've suppressed, it's no longer contained. And mixed with that is the suffering of those who died where the thorns grew. How do we fix it? Dr. Wells couldn't find a cure. He said the marks fade with time, but... We don't have time, the sheriff interrupted. People are hurting each other now. They spent the night making plans. By morning, they had decided on a course of action. Sheriff Davis would gather the marked ones at the town hall, under the pretense of discussing recent disturbances. Dr. Thorn would explain what had happened and what they could expect in the coming weeks and months. As the townspeople filed into the hall, Dr. Thorn studied their faces, people he had known for years, now strangers with shadows behind their eyes. He counted 47 marked palms, including his own. 47 people carrying an invisible burden. When everyone was seated, Dr. Thorn stepped to the front of the room. The hall fell silent, expectant. I owe you all an apology, he began, his voice steady despite the fear coiling in his chest. The treatment I gave you, the one that left these marks on your palms, it wasn't what I thought it was. He told them everything about the stranger, the thorns, Dr. Wells' journal. As he spoke, he watched their expressions shift from confusion to disbelief to anger. You poisoned us? Someone shouted from the back. Not intentionally, Dr. Thorns said. I thought I was helping. Martha Reeves stood up, her marked palm raised. So this feeling inside me, like I want to scream until my throat bleeds, that's not mine? Some of it is, Dr. Thorne admitted. The thorns didn't create new emotions. They just intensified what was already there. Broke down the walls we build to contain our pain. How do we get rid of it? The deputy asked, his hands clenched into fists. The marks will fade eventually. The feelings, those may take longer to subside. But recognizing what's happening is the first step to controlling it. A murmur ran through the crowd, a current of fear and anger. And if we can't control it? Sheriff Davis asked quietly. Dr. Thorne had no answer for that. The meeting dissolved into chaos shortly after, accusations thrown, threats made. Only the sheriff's presence prevented violence from erupting. In the days that followed, Meridian became a town divided. Those with marks began to isolate themselves, fearing what they might do if provoked. Families were split, friendships strained. Dr. Thorne kept his clinic open, but few came for treatment now. Instead, they came to show him their palms, to ask if the marks were fading, to seek reassurance that they weren't losing their minds. A month after the town hall meeting, the first suicide occurred. The Henderson boy, unable to bear the weight of his uncontrolled emotions, hanged himself in his parents' barn. At the funeral, Dr. Thorne stood apart from the mourners, the weight of responsibility crushing him. That night, he made a decision. Packing a small bag with supplies, he drove to the eastern ridge as the sun was setting. The thorny plants grew in patches across the red soil, their spines gleaming in the dying light. Dr. Thorne set up camp, building a small fire as darkness fell. From his bag, he took Dr. Wells' journal and a bottle of kerosene. It would be simple enough to burn the thorns, to ensure no one else would use them as he had. But as he raised the kerosene, a voice spoke from the darkness. That won't undo what's been done. The stranger stepped into the circle of firelight, his face as weathered as before but his eyes clear and knowing. You, Dr. Thorne said, anger rising in his throat. You knew what these would do. I knew they had power. What you did with that power was your choice. You said they would cure my patients. And they did. Their physical ailments are gone. The stranger squatted beside the fire. But healing is never simple, doctor. To cure the body without addressing the spirit is to do half a job. These people are suffering because of me. They were already suffering. The drought, the dying town, the hopelessness, those were slow poisons. The thorns just brought their pain to the surface where it couldn't be ignored. Dr. Thorne clutched the journal tightly. A boy is dead. Yes, the stranger acknowledged. And that is a tragedy. But others may yet live more fully because they face their pain instead of burying it. Who are you? Dr. Thorne demanded. Why did you bring the thorns to me? The stranger smiled faintly. I've had many names. As for why, let's just say I've seen this town's history unfold. The violence that fed these thorns. The silence that followed. Some wounds can only heal when they're reopened. He stood, brushing dust from his coat. Burn the thorns if you wish. Bury the journal. But remember that the real healing hasn't even begun. With that, he walked away, disappearing into the darkness beyond the firelight. Dr. Thorne sat alone, the kerosene bottle heavy in his hand. After a long while, he set it aside. Instead of burning the thorns, he dug a small hole at the base of the largest plant. There, he placed Dr. Wells' journal, covering it with earth. Let the truth stay with the source, he murmured. The next morning, he returned to Meridian. The town was quiet, subdued. He went to his clinic and opened the door, not knowing if anyone would come. Martha Reeves was his first visitor, arriving before the heat of the day. The mark is fading, she said, showing him her palm where the thorn shape had indeed grown fainter. And the feelings, they're still there, but not as overwhelming. That's good, Dr. Thorne said cautiously. Not good. Different. She settled into the chair across from him. I remember things now that I'd pushed away for years. My husband's death. My son moving away and never coming back. The drought killing everything I loved. She looked up, her eyes clear. It hurts. But it's my hurt. I'm not afraid of it anymore. Throughout the day, others came, some to report similar experiences, others still struggling with the surge of emotions. Dr. Thorne listened to them all, offering what comfort he could. Not as a physician dispensing cures, but as a fellow sufferer seeking understanding. In the weeks that followed, the marks continued to fade. Some of the townsfolk left Meridian, unable to bear the memories that had been unearthed. Others stayed, forming a different kind of community, one built on shared pain and the slow process of healing. Dr. Thorne kept his clinic open, though he no longer offered miracle cures. Instead, he listened. He witnessed. He shared in the burden of remembering. And sometimes, in the quiet hours of dawn, he would drive out to the eastern ridge, to the patch of thorny plants where he had buried the journal. He would sit in silence, watching the sun rise over the desert, feeling the weight of his choices and the possibility of redemption. The mark on his palm never fully disappeared. It faded to a thin white line, visible only in certain light, a reminder of the fine edge between healing and harm, between remembering and being consumed by memory. In time, rain returned to Meridian. Not enough to end the drought entirely, but enough to soften the hardened earth, to allow small green shoots to emerge from the dust. The town would never be what it once was, but perhaps it could be something new, something built on truth rather than forgetting. Dr. Thorne continued his solitary visits to the Thorns. On one such morning, as the first light broke over the horizon, he noticed something unusual, a single flower blooming among the thorny stems, white and delicate against the harshness of its surroundings. He knelt to examine it, careful not to touch the thorns. The flower seemed impossible, beautiful and fragile, yet growing from something that had caused so much pain. As he watched, a drop of dew fell from the flower's petal onto the ground, leaving a small dark spot on the red earth. Like a tear. Like forgiveness. Dr. Thorne rose slowly, his hand, marked palm facing outward, raised in a gesture that might have been farewell or benediction. Then he turned and walked back toward town, leaving the Thorns to their silent vigil over buried truths and the slow, painful miracle of healing.